can't hear me. Great morning, everyone. I know y'all are aware that Blake is absent. We are keeping his kiddos in our prayers, and my grandbaby, I think he got Yaya a little, gave me a little something, just a little bit after I had Yaya duty this weekend. So we are working through it. We're gonna all stand and say our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't have any other remarks from the board chair other than we are just going to take a brief moment of silence for our dearly departed one and only Gwen Robbins. Sorry, thank you for that. Sorry. In the coming days, please just keep her family in your prayers. I apologize. We will move on to the approval of our Finance Committee minutes from February 18th. Hopefully everyone has received those.
So moved.
Okay, thank you so much. Do you need to do a roll call on that?
Just a motion and second,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. I motioned.
I'll second.
it. Okay, thank you, Pete. Okay, all those in favor say yay.
Aye.
Thank you, yay. Thank you, and all those opposed, nay. All right, with that passage of our minutes from February 18th, we are going to turn over to Mr. Walker so that we can review our financial results as of February.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Clark.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. First off, before we get going, I just want to kind of frame everything that, again, this month, the sales tax information is booked to budget, so you won't see a variance there for the sales tax. Let's go to the summary of key drivers, Natalie. Thank you. You can see we start off with our revenue came in at a little over $13 million, which was slightly unfavorable to budget, a little bit less than 1% compared to budget. And we'll talk about this later, but it's largely driven by some ridership numbers that we saw a decline in compared to budget. On the expense side, we came in at $12.7 million. That was favorable, or we spent less than budget by about $160,000. Primarily, that was driven by some lower wages, and that was offset by some additional advertising spend that we'll go into. You net those things together, and you can see we came in with an operating capital contribution of about $400,000. Contribution, surplus, profit, if you want to look at it that way. And that was also favorable to budget. So while we were unfavorable to budget on the revenue side, we offset that with some favorability on the expense side. Ridership total came in at $1,050,000 for the month, which was unfavorable to budget. More details on that in the planning and ops. But while it was unfavorable, it was greater than last month and also rather flat compared to last year, even though last year had an additional day in February. Going down to the revenue lines, total operating revenue came in at $1.8 million. That was unfavorable to budget by about $43,000. And largely, again, that was driven by the decrease in fare revenue with the lower ridership, but slightly offset also with some additional CPS revenue with some passes. On the non-transportation side, that came in at right around $600,000, slightly unfavorable to budget. Primary driver on that was just a lower investable balance with some additional spend that we had late in the year compared to what we were budgeting. As I mentioned earlier, county sales tax booked to budget, and also the other grants line booked to budget as well. Going down to the expenses, you can see that the wages and benefits were favorable to budget by about $300,000. Largely, that was driven by we had some when we do the budget, we have a vacancy percentage built in. Our vacancy percentage was slightly higher, also with some lower driver count than what we had budgeted. Looking down on the fuel and lubricants, that was favorable or less than what we had budgeted. Largely, that was driven by just a decrease in some miles compared to our budget. Parts and supplies, unfavorable to budget by $23,000. Interesting when you look at the magic of the numbers. Fuel and lubricants were favorable by 23. Parts and supplies were unfavorable by 23. So really a net to zero on those. All other, they were unfavorable to budget by about $160,000. Primarily, that's just the timing of some advertising costs when we built the budget. Let's go to the next page, Natalie. And, you know, all is good now. I know you could see how I was a little stressed last month. We didn't have a full wall of numbers. We do have the full wall of numbers this month with our year-to-date figures. Going down, looking first at the ridership, that was unfavorable to budget for the month and year-to-date, as we've talked about. Going down to the fare revenue, for the month, the operating fares revenue was down compared to the budget by about $115,000. Also, that's slightly unfavorable to budget year-to-date, and primarily that's just the weather issues we had in January. We did have a weather issue in February, but primarily that's just driven by the lower ridership that we've been seeing. Going down to the non-op, we've talked about that. The big item there, the county sales tax, was booked to budget. The other items we've talked about. Again, going down to the expenses, we've covered those on the month side. Year-to-date side, you can see that we're favorable on our total expenses. And, you know, it's kind of nice to see looking down at the very bottom. While year-to-date we have a negative operating capital contribution of about $200,000. That is about $740,000 favorable to our budget. So while we're seeing some offsets here, but, you know, we are making it up on the expense side. So we are right there ahead of our budget, which is some good news. Let's go to the next page. You can see a slightly different look at our sales tax. Again, this is just for information for the group here, as it's not really a driver for our 2025 financial statements yet. Those are being booked right to budget, as you can see from the line. We're anxiously awaiting the release of the sales tax numbers for December, which should be coming out probably tomorrow or the next day. Go to the next page, Natalie. And the final page here that we're going to go over is our traditional look at our obligations and our cash. You can see we had almost $157 million of cash, but that's not all readily available for us. We do have some obligations that are coming out here. Not all in 2025. Some of these are for later years. But you can see at the end, while we have $157 million, and looking at our remaining operating budget surplus, we have a net of about $4.6 million. Looking at the capital reserve obligations, those are basically flat from last month, going through the line items. Small changes, but nothing really material. And that's all I have for the finance update. Any questions from the group? All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Hopefully you all noticed that those slides are a tad bit more streamlined, so thank you for working on that. Also, with this challenge, so to speak, we've been having with our county sales tax and getting that information and it coming in slightly under what we have anticipated. One thing I think that the team and all of Metro is doing an excellent job of is really managing our spending. That's really the only thing we can control. So working in that space, I was very impressed by some of the new processes that we have in terms of how we're, spending things and how we are bringing aboard new talent and the costs of that and how we're really making sure we manage those costs extremely well. I think that's also a reflection here in some of our numbers. So thank you so much. The investment funds report.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. And as Ms. Clark did mention, on the finance group, we did streamline some slides, but the world's all good because all my favorites stayed in the package. So that's
When you're in charge, you get to make
well, it wasn't quite in charge, but we had to do some voting, and I put some stickers, more stickers than I needed to on mine. And again, in the spirit of streamlining and consistency with other reports, we've kind of put our operating fund and our infrastructure fund here on the same page. Nothing spectacular here. We consolidated the U.S. Treasury line to include U.S. T-bills, Treasury bonds, and Treasury notes. But on the operating fund, you can see our yield was 4.35%, 4.4% on the infrastructure fund. Operating fund, $157 million, as we talked about, and right at $136 million on the infrastructure fund. So nothing unusual here. We had, as you know, didn't have a record-breaking spending on the infrastructure fund like we did last month, but still well over $1 million was dispersed to the municipalities for the various projects. Any questions on the investment of funds report? All right, I think this is one we have to go with the roll call on. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you for that. I move to approve the investment of funds report. Did I get a second? Thank you. Ready for roll call? Oh, it's a roll call?
This one isn't a roll call. You just,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It is. Okay, excellent. All in favor, please say yay.
Aye.
Or aye, sorry. All opposed, say nay. All right, with that, we will pass the investment of funds report. We don't have, at least as I see it, we have no new business. I will say that, just in closing, if you will, we will be able to honor our dear Gwen this Sunday on March 23rd at Corinthian Baptist Church. And that time, the family greeting will be at 12:30 p.m. and her celebration of life will be at 2 o'clock. Also, keep in mind that at our next board meeting, we'll have a tribute as well to her, so please make sure you're in attendance for that. With that, that's all I have. We can adjourn this meeting at 8:43.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clark. I'll jump in, and that meeting ended at 8:43, and ours will start at 8:43. We have a full agenda, a lot of good news, and several items to move on to the board meeting. So with that, hopefully everyone had a chance to look over the minutes from our February 18th meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve those. I'll put forth a motion to approve those. Is there a second? Ms. Clark seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. So the minutes are approved from the February 18th meeting. Our briefing items today come from the executive team, the good news report, and from Mr. Simon. So let's start off with the good news report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Ravazio.
Right, thanks, Dan. We've got Adrian to start us off with our January Silver Wheel Awards for our Employees of the Month.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is January Silver Wheel winners. We have, starting with Matt Mormon, who is the winner for the Leadership Award. What Matt has been pivotal in getting us started with a regional paratransit coordination project and launching of the new software that we use for that project, which supports Butler County Regional Transit, Metro, and Tank, and also for collaborating and with his team to launch the after-hours customer service support program. So congratulations to Matt. And then moving on to Tia Parker. Tia is administrative support employee, and Tia is actually a Easy Connect agent in the Easy Connect call center, and has been recognized for how she manages the call so seamlessly. She transitioned from another role within Metro right into the Easy Connect call center agent position, and she goes above and beyond for her in her role as Easy Care Connect agent. Next, we have Jeff Oliver. Jeff is being recognized for Queensgate operator, and Jeff is being recognized for his professionalism and integrity, and always being willing to help others. We have Queensgate maintenance employee Adam Roos, who is being recognized for his performance beyond expectation. He is a member of the non-revenue service team and responsible for roughly about 70 non-revenue vehicles that he's responsible for maintaining, and is always willing to help others as well. Bond Hill, operator. We have Jeremiah Worthen. Jeremiah is being recognized for his OTP, 96.5%, with 0 absences, accidents, and customer complaints for the month of January, and his positive attitude as well. Then we have Bond Hill maintenance employee who's actually a coach cleaner, Erin O'Leary, who is being recognized for her performance above expectations and always willing to assist others, her positive attitude and dependability. And then Access employee Aaron Wooten. Aaron's being recognized for his excellent OTP. He is also a driver at Access, and no disciplinary actions, absences, performance issues, and just a great with handling and managing his customers. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adrian. In case you didn't know, March is National Procurement Month, right? By looking at the blank stares at the table, you already all knew that. That's not news.
Celebrate.
Yeah. You're the ones that bought all the greeting cards. That's why there aren't any in the aisles in the stores. But we are celebrating National Procurement Month, and no better way than to recognize Manager Christina Harvey. Christina is here. Christina, yeah. Christina has been selected as the Manager of the Year by the Ohio chapter of the National Institute for Government Purchasing. This is given to a manager who has made significant contributions, certainly to the field, and who embodies the principles of accountability, ethics, and professionalism. That's certainly Christina. That is certainly our entire procurement team under John Edmondson's leadership. Once again, happy National Procurement Month, and congratulations, Christina. Next up's hot lead to look back at a successful round of projects and our most recent infrastructure fund signing ceremony.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we just finished our 4th year of the Metro Transit Infrastructure Fund. And just like we do every year, we had the signing ceremony, a simple one, unlike previous years, but it was a great one. We awarded $19.2 million of new awards in round 4. And, our board members, Blake and Sarah, were there. Each, spoke a little bit about, the program. Our CEO, of course, was there as well. And it was a great ceremony. And we heard from all the attendees, all 7 of them, because that's how many different jurisdictions were awarded. Each and every one of them had great things to say about the program and the awards and so on. The program is continue to grow. We've awarded so far over $314 million, and the entire community is pretty proud of this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Brandy's got some exciting news. Metro activities on Capitol Hill at the State House, opening day promotions, and more recognition for employees. Brandy.
Thank you for the tee up, John. Good morning, everyone. The Metro team has been busy, and earlier this month, we were on all fronts making sure that we're meeting with our elected officials and that they knew what we were doing here at Metro and the progress we were making and how their continued investment in us would further improve our community. Several of us went to Washington, D.C. to meet with the newest members of the delegation, as well as the Federal Transit Administration, and we heard a lot of great feedback. Some were super impressed with how well we had been managing our budget and the investment that our local region had made through the sales tax and what we were able to do with that, and really to see the impact that we had been making. So we're very grateful to our leaders and thankful for the time they took to meet with us. And while we were there, at the same time, our own John Ravazio was in Columbus testifying on the State Transportation Committee to making sure that we're helping advance legislation that protects our workers as best we can. and also advocating for more state support in our investment. So we're just thrilled to have a team who is out and about and making sure that in all levels of our government, they know what we are doing here in Southwest Ohio. Opening day, March 27th. If you are planning to come down and enjoy the festivities, we encourage you to ride Metro. It is a great way to go. Leave the parking and the traffic congestion behind and enjoy the day. All services, all our fixed route service and our access service will be free to ride. And with all the recent improvements that we've made to our system, it's a great way to introduce people to Metro and to hop on board at no cost. So we're hoping that this free ride day gives people an opportunity to see how easy it is and that they'll keep coming back and riding all day long. But a moment of note, because of the opening day parade, Government Square will be closed during that parade period. So we just encourage everyone, if you hear someone talking about taking the bus, make sure they check our website, sign up for easy alerts. They can get that information about any detours that may be happening that day. And we will also be in the parade. Evie, our Metro bus there, will be in the parade. So if you would like to walk with us, bring your children, what have you, just let me know and we'll get you all of our information of where to meet us to walk in that parade. Today, there's actually a typo. It's today, March 18th. It's National Transit Employee Appreciation Day. And as you all know by now, we don't do anything small here at Metro, so we're celebrating all week long. We want to make sure that our 1,200 plus employees at all of our facilities, all of the roles here that make what we do work, that make the wheels turn no matter their role, feel special, feel celebrated, and know that their efforts are valued. So all week long, we'll have special treats and activities in their facilities, just saying thank you for your efforts. So please join us all week long and thanking a Metro employee for their service to our community.
All right, thanks, Brandy. Speaking of, we don't do anything small at Metro. We had our Golden Bus Awards ceremony earlier this month. Take a look at that picture in the top right and realize that that's the best of the best in terms of our Metro employees, this organization's employees. That could be a red carpet picture at any awards ceremony that you can think of. What a great time, what a great event, certainly put on by Brandy and team there. The awards program itself managed by Adrian and team. But then also I love that shot on the left, Daryl with his finger number one in the air. Under your leadership direction, this program, we've built a number one culture. We've built an award-winning culture, an organization worthy of recognition. Thank you to everybody that came out. Hope you enjoyed it. emceed by the one and only Curtis Fuller for 2 years in a row. He has as much fun there as anybody else. So thank you to everybody that made it happen, and we're already looking forward to next year's event. Mr. Chair, that's the news.
All right, John, thanks as always for the good news, and thanks to Adrian, Brandy, and Haled for sharing the good news about the award recipients and the MTIF funds. Moving on our agenda, our ridership report. Haled, can you walk us through that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good morning again. I think we're doing this slightly different than previously. Moving forward, I'll cover the first few slides and then I'll turn it over to Bill. In terms of ridership, the month of February ended with just over 1 million trips, 1,029,000, about 10% lower than budgeted. There are 3 factors to that. One, there were, the weather, that's an element, but not the major contributor to the shortfall. The other 2 factors is, compared to last year, there was 1 less weekday than last year's, but also some service changes that were supposed to take place last December, service improvements that we couldn't implement due to shortage of drivers. That certainly had an impact on the projected ridership. Next. In terms of access, I'm sorry, did you skip one? No, you're good, I'm the one skipping, sorry. Just checking on you. So access, for access ridership, we had 13,427. about 12% lower than expected. To date, we have about 26,414 over the past couple months. Next slide. For Metro Now, that service continues to grow. The ridership, as you know, you've seen over the past year or so, has been growing every month. The orange line, which is the budgeted, you can see kind of like an inflection point at December. It kind of goes up. This is just our prediction that ridership was going to grow, even more in 2025, which turned out to be the case, and we actually still exceeded that expectation. So the month of February had just over 9,400 passengers, which is about 27% over the budgeted number. Next. In terms of some of the other stats, if you look at the top left corner, the local service productivity is just over 15 passengers per hour, slightly lower than budgeted, but nevertheless, it's trending in the right direction and pretty close to what the expected number should be. Next to that, on the right, the express service productivity is at 8.5 passengers per trip, lower than budgeted, which is still expected. However, we're in a kind of holding mode there, expecting more and more employees to return to downtown, and that number should continue to improve over time. The lower left corner, access service productivity, is at about 1.9 passengers per hour, about 0.3 lower than budgeted. And then the chart on the lower right is that of Metro Now. As you can see, productivity has been going up. We don't have an established target yet because that'll be coming in the next few months as we finish doing all the required analysis on that service. Next. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Khalid. And as you can tell, we are, as we change up our reporting for this year, Khalid's going to be doing the ridership, and then I'll switch and talk about some service quality. I hope you like the new format. We've tried to thin it down, standardize even the coloring and the formatting. So you go from the financial report to our report, and you can see that consistency. So we have fixed route on-time performance, and you can see that we did a little bit better than we did in January. We're still below the goal. We did have a couple more days of weather that affected us in February, and then also something called the flu bug, which we will see on a chart coming up, which went through, and in our operation, when something like the flu hits, it goes through very fast through the workforce. So we are rebounding from that. You can see for access, the on-time performance is just under goal. Again, we had a couple of weather days there and the flu bug, but we've rebounded and we are expecting to be at goal. We are at goal this month so far, so we're hoping to finish strong there and continue to build on that. We've added Metro Now on-time performance. This is our ability to pick up the customer within less than 5 minutes of the time that we provided to the customer, and you can see that we are very consistent there and providing a great service to those customers. And next slide. So fixed route missed trips has been obviously in everyone's attention span for quite a while, and you can see we're really making good progress. We rebounded from January. Again, those February numbers were affected a bit by the flu and by a couple of weather days, but we're on a really good trend. We are going to see those numbers continue to hover near the goal or potentially slightly above the goal. We are continuing to work hard on our staffing, but we are not where we need to be, so we continue to work on that. As we switch, this is a new chart. We think it's important that we see how we are doing with our customers, and so we've developed this chart to show customer service reports received per every 100,000 passengers. And this is a way that the industry measures our customer service. And because we do it per 100,000 riders, we're able to scale that based upon the ridership. And you can see that we've made some significant improvements here. When we first started tracking this, we were at around 43 complaints per 100,000 passengers, and we're now down. Our goal was 30 to begin the year, and we really had a great February. And this takes in all of our channels. These are anything that comes in to anyone in the company through an email, through a text, through our websites, our social media. All of that gets fed back into our customer service management system, which is Salesforce that we're using. So all of those channels feed into these numbers. And these are overall customer service complaints received. The next chart is a new one as well that we've added in for being able to monitor how we're doing with service reliability. And those are miles between mechanical service interruptions. And this is the number of times that our fleet does not finish its assignment during the day. We do that per miles, again, as a ratio of the service that we operate. And so you can see we are below our goal. And that is a point of emphasis for us as we move forward this year. We are doing a deep dive on our maintenance operation, and we're continuing to work on that this year and expect these numbers to rebound.
I have a quick question for that. I think this may be, is this a new slide?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Does this, is this lumps in all three of our vehicle types?
No, this is fixed route.
This is, okay.
Yes, our big bus system.
Okay.
And that concludes the ridership and service quality report.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you, and those new reports are nice to see. So, and specifically on the reports, the complaints, it's at the budget lower number, and to come in lower than the budgeted lower number is really nice to see. So, congratulations on that. And Haled, thanks for going through the ridership report for us. Okay, moving down our agenda, are there any questions about those two reports, the ridership report? Pete?
Just a quick question. I like the format as well. And you all may have discussed this. I missed last board meeting, so if I'm catching up, tell me. Are we at this point no longer going to see route level details? Are we going to see those from time to time? What's the plan there? I'm a nerd, and every once in a while dig into those. Not every time.
So the route level detail.
That's at the pleasure of this committee, for sure.
Yep.
It's whatever you want to see, whenever you want to see it. We realized that over the course of the last couple of years, we weren't digging into that level of detail, especially in this meeting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's however you would like to. We continue to compile that information. So if you want that in the packet quarterly, just for review, we can do that.
So
It's
Pete,
your
would you
pleasure.
like to see it in the packet, but maybe not report it out at the meeting?
I think that's fine. I don't want to put. I like the streamlined nature of this. I just every once in a while I'll be able to glance and say, hey, how are certain routes doing? Is a nice touch.
I guess I've got a question too on Metro Now.
Yeah.
Because we're doing so well, is there any need to adjust the budget number to reflect? We've been above our budget since the beginning. I don't know if it matters too much or not, but should we adjust the budget?
Yeah, so the staff has really, for the past at least couple months, been digging very, very, very deep into all this data. And it's going to take them at least another month or two just because of everything else they're working on. What they're working on is we need, just learning from the past year and a half, we want to come up with numbers not only for ridership, the expected ridership, but also for productivity and so on. So these targets that we can use, because at one point we need to get out of this pilot mode.
Right.
We're still running it as a pilot. And to do that, we just need to come up with these KPIs. And that number would be, to your point, would probably be higher.
Mr. Driehaus, the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll be adjusting that and then.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And we did budget for these kinds of increasing levels based upon what we saw in '24 and made those assumptions in our budget for 2025 that this service is going to continue to incrementally grow.
It has really taken off since we've done the budget. We've had some pretty exciting months. One of the other things, and we have to really watch, is there was a lot of weather. There wasn't a lot of snow in February, but there was a lot of low temperatures in February. And one of the things we're still learning is, we understand how the weather affects Big Bus. We're learning how weather affects Metro now. And one of the things that's been really interesting, if you look at January and February, we had a really large increase in ridership. Is that because of the marketing? Is that because more people understand the service? Or do Metro Now customers, when it gets real cold, do they choose that service versus getting in their car, choosing other things? So we're really looking at Metro Now because it is such a new service, and how do we manage that? March, we haven't had a lot of really cold weather, so I'm really interested in seeing how March ends up, because this is new service and we're still learning, how those customers react to weather and other things.
Right.
But yeah, we will be updating that.
And one thing just to keep in mind, that even though February was less than January by only 65 rides, there were 3 days less in February than January.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the discussion. And the pilot phase, we're moving on from the pilot phase soon, it sounds like. Okay. Awesome. So there were action items now, unless anybody has anything else to share or question about the reports we just went through. Okay. Okay. So now moving on to our action items, I wanted to, if you could, Steve, could you bring us through a little bit? Title VI isn't something that we're all totally current on, and we know that we have to comply. And if you could go and elaborate on Title VI a little bit for us, either Haled or Steve, either one of you. You're both listed on here, so.
Sure, good morning. So Title VI, a couple months ago, we redid our service system-wide standards, productivity, frequency, on-time performance. That is a precursor to the overall Title VI plan that must be submitted every 3 years as part of the FTA requirements with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So we updated the service standards. We took a holistic look at a lot of our quality service monitoring. All of that is baked in the report, and we're asking for approval to move a resolution approved to the Board of Trustees.
Could you, if you don't mind, Steve, just maybe like a minute on what's included in the Title VI report?
Absolutely. So we look at how we're communicating to folks of different languages, different populations. We take a look at the recent census data. We qualify routes as minority versus non-minority to check to make sure that distribution of transit amenities is equitable, on-time performance. We're not disproportionately favoring one community over another. In addition, it's a collection of our service change analysis that we've done, 5 major service changes since the last time we submitted as part of Reinventing Metro. It looks at everything we do, age of vehicles, amenity deployment, this, that, and the third, to ensure that our impacts are equitable, meaning we're not disproportionately impacting low-income and or minority communities at the expense of non-low-income and non-minority communities. I'm not sure if the draft is in folks' packet.
Yeah, it's in there.
So, yeah.
So, all right, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Aled. So the resolution today is to authorize our CEO to go forward and staff to submit the update for Title VI program to the Federal Transportation Administration by April 1st. So that's the proposal that we have to move forward to the larger board. I'd make a motion to move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Clark seconds. I think it could go on consent unless you feel like there's a need to discuss further in the board meeting.
I just want to make one comment and acknowledge just how much work this is, and I thank Steve and your team because this really requires a deep dive into all facets of the organization and how we do business, and really with a careful eye to make sure we're serving the entire community in an equitable way. So I know that it's a big job to do this, and I just want to thank you for doing it.
It's all the team. Thank you, Board Member Sheeps.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we'll move that forward. Bill, we wanted to talk about one of our favorite items on the agenda today. Bill was here some time ago at Metro and has experienced the break rooms. And the break rooms haven't changed much since Bill's first days at Metro. So, Bill, can you walk us through this item, please?
Yes, thank you. This is an exciting action item that you're going to get in a couple of minutes. It is to finally, and I say finally, redo our employee break room areas. These are general areas where our employees collect before they go to work. In between, if you remember, a lot of our work are on split runs. Our employees come to work, they come back in, they take a break, they go back out. So our employee break rooms are more than just a break room, right? They are areas where people they have a meal, they meet with their friends, their colleagues, and they even do training out there. We will have a group of trainees sitting out in the collection area doing some training. So it's a very important area for all of our operations, including in the maintenance department. So we've got break rooms in Access, Queensgate, and Bond Hill. The ones that are most in need are at Queensgate and Bond Hill. And I thought I probably should share a couple of pictures just to let you know. And as Mr. Driehaus said, I think some of these I may have helped decorate back in 1982, and they still look like this. So you can see here, this is the Queensgate operations break room, and these are pictures taken just Friday and Saturday as to what it actually looks like. There's the vending areas, some seating areas. And so the plan is to refresh these areas, redo these areas. And on the next slide, we've got some very cool artist renditions of what the areas could and will look like. We are replacing flooring and ceiling, and we're taking down some of the rooms. We're looking for large, open, and inviting areas now, which is a little bit different. When these break rooms were built, when these facilities were built, there weren't laptops, there weren't computers, there was not a need for monitors for our employees. So a lot of things have changed, and we're looking to do all of that at Queensgate. Queensgate is probably the one that's oldest and most in need, but all of them do. If you go to the next one. Not to be outdone, there's the Bond Hill operations break room, which I think I also may have been taking responsibility for how it looks back in the early 90s, maybe. And you can see we've even had to do some flooring in the back there in that first picture. We've got a large enclosed room on the left-hand side there, and it's just a very congested area. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what those artist renditions can look like and what we plan to do. Again, all to make our facilities modern, engaging, warm, and professional for our employees, because we really are the best system in the country, and our facility should look the same way. So you'll get this action item here in a couple of minutes, and just wanted to make sure you saw the excitement that all of our employees have. We're doing our town hall meetings this week, and our employees hear about the break rooms, and I get to present those, and I say, this is a long time coming, but we've probably been talking about these maybe when I was here before, we were still talking about redoing them, so we're finally there, and it's exciting. So, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sproul. Mr. Sproul, those images from early on I worked at the post office in 1990, and they remind me very much of that time, of the break rooms. So, appreciate the updates. That action item will come up in a bit in our agenda here. So, thanks, Mr. Sproul. We have 4 action items on our agenda, and John, are you going to walk us through those 4?
Yes, sir. Happy to. 4 procurements in front of the board here this month. The details are in your packets, but we'll certainly walk through them here at a high level. First up is a contract for a regional paratransit consultant. We already have a contract with this vendor that is a $98,000 original contract. This is a modification for an additional $65,000 awarded as a sole source. This is really to help us continue to work on that 13-step project plan. You'll recall that plan to bring regional paratransit services to life. This is a modification with Regional Mobility Group, LLC. Next up is a project. This is our business intelligence dashboard. So we're seeking to contract with the vendor Transite to integrate multiple data sources here. We have separate data platforms for transit operations, for fleet maintenance, budgeting. Our HRIS is a different platform. Imagine all of these working in aggregate, pulling data from these systems in a real-time way to make better decisions driven by data in much better ways. This contract would be a 100% XBE contract with Transite. We are seeking a not-to-exceed authority of $256,000, though the final cost proposed by the vendor is $149,000. We're seeking that not-to-exceed room to take into account, what a project like this might entail to integrate all those different platforms. Third up, we don't do anything here without motor oil, right? We procure motor oil on an annual basis. This is an IFB contract we're seeking to award to Hawkins Bailey Warehouse. We purchase approximately 30,000 gallons of motor oil a year across 4 different types. We're seeking that $291,000 not to exceed authority. That's our budgeted number. It should be noted that the vendor's proposal, the bid price was $233,000, but this being a consumable product subject to our use, this not to exceed would match our budgeted number, just to make sure we have the authority there to purchase motor oil as we need to throughout the year to keep operating. And last up, as Bill just walked through, the break room contract. This was also an invitation for bid contract. We're seeking to award it to Kiker Development, LLC, a local XBE vendor. That would be a $2.1 million, 100% XBE award across, as Bill mentioned, 6 different break areas, 3 at Queensgate, 2 at Bond Hill, 1 at Access. It should be noted this contract is $311,000 unfavorable to budget, but it is an IFB. It is to be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder. This has been a challenging project to get through the procurement steps in terms of coming up with our estimated cost estimates, given the market, given the size, given the specialty of the work. But yeah, it should be noted that unfavorable budget, $311,000, but the $2.1 million award is the lowest bid from the market. So happy to take any more detailed questions, but those are the 4 items in front of the board.
Well, I'm glad you underscored it's the lowest bid of the ones we received.
That's right.
So, and do you know how many we received?
I think 3 in the end. John, any more detail on that, the bids?
3 is correct.
3?
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that. And on the matrix here, obviously the MBE spend in the green for the month is substantial. The year to date, that is where we were prior to this month, right? Is that what that means? So that 10.3 at 2.7%, that doesn't include this current contract, right?
That's right.
Okay. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, that matrix includes our 4 action items. We're in committee here. We're going to move them over. I'd like to move them over to our agenda for our meeting next week. Is there a need to, I'd be happy to put them on consent. Is there any need not to have them on consent?
I got a question about the
Tony?
road renovations. What were the 3 contractors that bid on it outside of these guys here?
Sure. I believe we have that in the action item. Right. Thank you. Kiker Development, John Cecil Construction, and Viability.
Viability.
Mm-hmm.
You said John Cecil.
Yes. There we go.
Okay. Tony, is that good? You see that there?
I see it. My concern is about John Cecil. I don't know too much about Kiker. They new around here. For a bid to come in that low on a $2 million project just don't sit right with me.
but I do some more digging. When they're supposed to go on to the agenda next week for next week's meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what contingencies do we have if somebody bids low and doesn't fulfill the obligations?
Sure. Yeah, John, can you walk us through how we get to our own cost estimate and then go to market to make sure that we're getting a fair price?
Good.
Thank you. Good morning. Construction projects are preceded by an architectural engineering firm setting the design for that project. And then along with that design, they provide to us a cost estimate for what they believe that the construction of that project is going to cost. We review both the design and the cost estimate with our own in-house expertise. If there are drastic changes in opinion or differences in opinion, then we go back to the engineering firm to help kind of fine tune and refine that cost estimate. Once the estimate is finalized, we send it out into the marketplace. We review all of the incoming bids for how close they are to that estimate. If they're significantly higher or lower than that cost estimate that came from the engineer, then we cancel the solicitation. We meet again with the engineer, again further fine tune the estimate, and then we'll go back out to solicitation again. In this particular instance, the cost estimate for this project came in at roughly $1.8 million, pardon me. So the low bid from construction of 1.95 combined with the contingency total value of 2.1 was not that far off from that estimate.
Great. Okay. Thanks for walking us through that. Tony, does that answer your questions? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for walking us through those items, everyone. So I would move, or I am moving, to put all four of those items on our consent agenda. Is there a second? Chelsea seconds that. All those, do we have to do these all together? Can we do it one by one? Great. All those in favor moving these to consent signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so thank you. All those are moved to our consent agenda at our full board meeting next week. New business. Any new business, anyone? Okay, that's a wrap for, go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Did you say Mr.?
Ms. Clark.
I think that we have, I really appreciate all the good news. I think it's great. It's great news. We have a lot of things that are moving certainly in the right direction. For this year, for 2025, I would like to see certain things that especially we can talk about that don't necessarily have to be brought to the full board, but any of those things or items that cause us a tad bit of concern or a little hesitation with our current climate, I'd really like to know, you know, what are some actual concerns that we have or that that affect our operations. And just so that we're in the know, not that it, you know, not in terms of trying to scare us or anything like that, but just so that we can kind of track and see how we are being more proactive instead of reactionary, because things are going to come up. That way we're not having to address them, excuse me, after the fact.
Are you alluding to like potential federal revenue sources or?
I think that's an element of it, but I don't know what other things get talked about amongst departments. Maybe it's hiring, excuse me, maybe it's some hiring and other challenges and how we're addressing those things throughout the year as well. I'm sorry.
I can speak a little bit to what we're hearing from Washington, right? And to your point, we're trying to stay ahead of all of this. It's difficult because it changes daily. Right now, our current approach is that business as usual for everything that we're doing. That being said, we are trying to read the tea leaves, see where the guidance is going, and make contingent plans if we need to make adjustments and shifts. Two really big things that have happened within the last week. One is, as you saw, the Senate approved the continuing resolution on funding. So with that continuing resolution, the major transit programs were funded for the balance of the fiscal year. We had a 5/12 apportionment of FTA funding. Then that was the pre-government shutdown, right? That was the first 5 months leading up to March. This continues the 7/12 and gets us a full year of federal apportionment. So formula funding, which is a big part of Tim's budget is unaffected, and it's essentially funded at very similar levels to last year, which is very similar to the last 5 years. So no major changes to the baseline formula funding that we're receiving. The next piece are trying to understand what might change on those competitive and discretionary grants. This week, the Secretary of Transportation's office sent a memo to the modal administrators. So that's like the administrator of the FTA or the administrator of the FAA or the Federal Highway Administrator, basically asking those administrators to review their discretionary grant agreements and giving some criteria that they should look at in terms of meeting the president's executive orders. So that is way upstream from us, but we're able to look at that information and try to plan, if all that filters to us, how it may or may not impact our existing grants. So to your point, we don't have any direct guidance from the Federal Transit Administration to do anything yet, but we're trying to anticipate, based on what we're seeing at higher levels, what that might look like, so we can react left or right depending upon what ultimately happens. But at the end of the day, we will receive written guidance from the Federal Transit Administration before we will make any change. But we're preparing for a number of different ways to change, if that helps answer your question at all.
And that was also the reason we went to D.C. To meet with a new delegation, to meet with the FTA, so that they could really understand what was important for transit, where we were, you know, how we've been a very good steward of the taxpayers' dollars, how our community is investing in ourselves. You know, our growth came from our tax dollars here. And how we've invested in ourselves. So we wanted to make sure we got there early and told our story prior to them making some of the decisions that they're going to make here as time moves on. There is a lot of unknown in D.C. right now. We just wanted to get there early to make sure they understood what our needs were.
All right, thank you for that. Then just lastly, and I apologize, keep adding some things I didn't read all my notes. So as undoubtedly other entities are going to end up being affected, they may not be as impacted as we are. And so they may seek resources from us. What do we have in place in terms of procedural guidelines that we look for that they, in essence, have to, so at a council level, right, if they're asking for certain things, there are exceptions, there are certain standards that they have to meet that we have to agree that they've met after they've presented X amount of information. Do we have something like that in place?
So SORTA is its own entity, and we report to the SORTA Board of Directors. So we don't answer to any other agency or a political entity in Hamilton County. We report to the SORTA board. So all of the decisions about all of the funding that comes through SORTA, all of those decisions come from the SORTA board. So the SORTA board determines how all of the finances and everything runs through this organization. We don't report up through anyone else. We're a subdivision of the state.
Right, I'm aware of that, but I'm saying, do we have a steps of procedures in place where if someone is seeking resources from us, whether those are services or whether those are monetary in value, that they've got to say, okay, well, you need to present this, this, and this, and then we've got certain standards that are in alignment with the works that we have here in order for approvals?
So I think the answer to that is no. We, with Issue 7 and the Reinventing Metro plan, we're using the resources we have to deliver on that plan. The answer is yes with the MTIF. So we already know that is a very established program where municipalities ask for funds and we grant those funds back out. That program is firewalled from our public transit program. Any outside entity seeking to supplement or looking for funds that may complement our public transit program, those are handled on a one-by-one basis. And this board has done that in the last couple of years. If there's an issue that comes up, it's going to come up on a one-to-one. And I think that's the exception, not the rule. primarily those revenues are created for us to deliver bus service to the community, and that's what we're trying to do. And that's true 99.5% of the time. Those one-offs would be come to this board for consideration.
Okay. So I think that we should look at, so that, I'm not exactly sure how many departments I would go through, but I think we need to have some sort of a skeletal framework of what that could look like. And if you all could bring that at our next meeting, and then we could discuss it further, that'd be wonderful, in hopes of being able to take it to the full board, so that we have consistency and objectivity, I think is fair.
Got it.
Okay, are there additional comments or questions for our committee? Okay, then we will all be together next week. Thank you for your time this morning for planning and ops. Thank you. Sarah, are you going to? Okay.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Okay, is that better? Okay, calling the meeting to order and putting forth a motion to approve the January 21st minutes of the Infrastructure, Bike, and Right-of-Way Committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Mr. Driehaus seconded. Thank you. Before we get into our briefing items, I did just want to take a minute to say a few words about Gwen, because I will not be here. I will miss the service on Sunday and will not be here for the meeting next week due to spring break. You know, her legacy will be felt across this community for a long time, and words of love and gratitude will be expressed, and you know, for a long time as well. And I just wanted to say that I admired her from afar for a long time, for decades before I even met her. I mean, she was such a figure and a force in this community, and I was so excited to join the board, partly to get to work with her and to get to know her. And the last couple of years of being present with her around this table and learning from her and listening to her wise words was something that I will always be grateful for. What I loved about her is that she centered this work around the human experience, and whether that was her care for riders, community members, staff, and you know, just the community in general, I think was one of her biggest contributions. So it's my hope that our board will continue to carry out her spirit and commitment to all of those people and to that work. So it feels strange without her here, and I'm sorry that I'll miss the more formal remembrances next week. So thank you. Okay, so for our committee reports, we have two briefing items, and Haled and Jason are going to lead us through those, starting with the rail right-of-way sale process.
I think I've spoken enough this morning. I'll turn it over to Jason. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. I believe the last time we met was back in the fall, so I'll quickly just touch on the history of the rail right-of-way. Most of this was originally purchased in the mid-'90s in support of the I-71 corridor project, more commonly referred to as Metro Moves. This is the Oasis corridor. It's approximately 16.5 miles and 117 acres. As you can see, it stretches from the crown piece there around Tedbury Park all the way up north into Avondale. Next slide, please. This is what we commonly refer to as the Blue Ash South. There is not current rail on these properties. These are non-contiguous properties that are within the city of Cincinnati, Norwood, primarily. This was also purchased in support of Metro Moves for approximately $685,000 in the mid-'90s. These parcels include property that is within Xavier's campus, as well as the Wasson Way bike trail that we provided an easement for. Next slide, please. And then lastly, this is the Blue Ash North Corridor. It's 9.6 miles, stub-ended, approximately 59 acres. This was also purchased in the mid-90s and supported the same project. From south to north, it runs roughly from the McCullough Yard in Norwood and then ends just north of School Road up in Sycamore Township. Next slide, please. So around 2020, we were contacted by the FTA as we use FTA federal funds to purchase these properties. And as we had not actually used them for transit purpose, they wanted to know what we intended to do with them and encouraged us to either use them or sell them. So we contracted with AECom. They did a current rail operations assessment, looked at our physical conditions, our maintenance needs, all the crossings that are related and safety concerns, as well as bridges. They provided an evaluation and recommendations report, and they recommended at the time to dispose of the rail property as we did not have an intended transit use. Next slide, please. So since 2020, since 2022, when they delivered the recommendations report, we started working towards disposition. And then last year, we had a lot of accomplishments. We accomplished having a real property appraisal as well as a follow-up appraisal report. We submitted those to the FTA for review. FTA provided their concurrence of the value August of last year. We then moved forward with hiring a real estate broker to help us. We engaged internal Metro stakeholders, did some requirements gathering. We developed a sales strategy. We actually have, we haven't really sold property before, so it was new for us. So we kind of worked with our procurement team on what a solicitation would look like in order to do that. And we were able to release our first solicitation for the north section of Blue Ash in January. And those bids are actually due at the end of this month. Next slide, please. So the next steps for our disposal plan will be to continue working with the FTA on perhaps a transfer of the Oasis bike trail portion, and then work on the rest of our disposition, the sale of our other properties, generally working north to south. We currently have the Blue Ash North out. We'll move to Blue Ash South and then work on the northern sections of the Oasis line, and then finally working down to the Oasis Crown piece, estimated to be later on this summer. Are there any questions?
Yes, what is the process, say we get multiple bids, what is the process for determining who we sell it to? Is it just the top bidder, or do we have other criteria?
There will be a procurement review to make sure that they are responsible bidders. You can't be debarred from doing business with public entities. You can't be delinquent on taxes, those types of things. So procurement will handle that process. But essentially, the process of public sale is to maximize value. So given that they can do business with us, we will sell to the highest bidder.
And
and Jason, technically, do we need to receive concurrence from FTA before we accept that FTA will accept that amount bid as adequate?
Yeah, we will, whatever the bids come back as, we have an assumption of value based on the appraisals, and we had the FTA's concurrence on that. So we will return back the market price for them to review and determine their amount of interest. We'll also get to work with them on removing some of our costs associated with selling these properties, and some of our consultants' costs that we've had to incur. We'll be able to remove some of those costs, and the FTA will let us know essentially how much we have to pay them back and how much of those funds will come back to Metro.
And a lot of that will be based on what percentage. A lot of that would be based on what percentage they paid for the rail right-of-way when it was purchased back in the 90s. So if they paid for 90% of it and we paid for 10% of it, they get back 90% of the value in which it's sold for. But again, like he said, we will get to recoup some of our expense in order to sell this property. So we've been keeping track of all the expense that we've gone through to sell the property.
Let me just jump in here real quick. We're not anticipating any type of financial windfall here.
Right.
So because most of the dollars are going, it's just, so, you know, maybe some eyes got a little bigger. It's not going to be a financial windfall for
Right.
us. You know, get what we put into it.
FTA
I've got a
paid
concern
for
it's
at
more the
least
opposite.
90%.
My concern is more the opposite, that a highest bidder might not be the highest best user of these parcels, for goodness sakes. This is decades-long property that we've held, and a buyer might not look like the highest bidder on certain portions of this thing.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a critical subject, I would think.
This is where I was going with this.
So Sarah, go
yes.
ahead.
Yes. So what happens if we have someone who offers the highest amount but has a plan to land bank for whatever reason, and then we have a community use that was going to, have a high impact on that community, and but it's not the highest bid. So how are we evaluating those types of scenarios?
For the properties that have operating freight rail, there is a perpetual easement that's provided to the IRE for that. So the IRE, as long as they are in business, they are the operator of those freight rails, and whoever purchases the property will essentially be the new landlord. That perpetual easement has precedence, and they won't be able to interrupt their operating of those rail corridors.
We aren't able to take, FTA does not allow us to take into consideration what the purchaser may or may not do with the property, if that's your question. We have requested in certain sections for the FTA to allow us to transfer this right away to another public entity, like namely a city, right, or the county or something along those lines. Preliminary response from FTA is that they will not allow that transfer, and they're forcing sale at market value. So FTA will let us know whether the bid that we got back was acceptable to them to be considered fair market value. So for example, if it comes in well under the appraised value, FTA may say, you didn't do a good job of marketing this property. We're not accepting this as, you resolving your interest in the property. They may force us to go back out to bid. They may force us to redo our appraisal. We don't know. We have to go through this public competitive process. We feel like we've done a good job marketing. We will get bids, and then based on what those bids are, we give that to FTA, and then they will tell us whether they accept it or not.
Okay.
But we're not allowed to. It's very clear in the FTA law and rules that it's the highest market value, and we can't use other criteria, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank
And
you. So
it's
we have very little control over this. Okay.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's also important to know that this is not just happening with our rail right-of-way. This is happening with rail right-of-way across the country. There are transit agencies across this country that back in the 90s bought a bunch of rail right-of-way, and the FTA has asked all of those agencies, if you have not used it for the purposes intended that we gave you the money for, you must sell the right-of-way. We've been in contact with several transit agencies that are going through the exact same thing we're going through.
The control we have, to the extent we would want to exercise it, and I'm not advocating for this specifically, is that we owe FTA money, right? We are the most effective and efficient way for us to give FTA their money back is to dispose of the real estate and use the proceeds of that sale to give FTA their money back. If there is a situation where we are concerned about the potential use change, our recourse would be to decide to utilize our own money. I'm not advocating for that, but that's the only way we have control. We don't get to control who gets to buy it from us. We do get to control whether we sell it and use the proceeds to do that, or to return other funds to FTA. Yes. So that's the only way we'd.
And
We owe the money, but we don't know what the amount of money is that we owe.
Yeah.
Well, we do. We actually do. Okay. So to Pete's point, FTA will consider themselves made whole if they receive the fair market value for that property. So the appraised value is what they consider. They approve the appraisals, so they consider that the fair market value. So there's an auction going on. Another way to determine fair market value is to do the auction, right? So it's kind of like a buy it now button in an auction. So to Pete's point, FTA, all this property appraised for $55 million, right? So if we, based on these appraisals, gave them $55 million, we have satisfied our obligation of giving them fair market value. So with each of these segments, there's kind of a buy it now button. If a city wanted to come in and not a public entity didn't want to go through the bid process, they would have to pay us the fair market value.
Okay.
Without any kind of negotiation or bidding. We could give that to FTA and they would say, you're satisfied. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more sense for sure.
So but it is I think we were shocked when we learned that all of this right away would appraise for 55. I mean, $55 million is a lot of money.
I think the city's shocked too.
Absolutely. So that's
Cincinnati.
why we're going to learn. That's Jason's very strategic in the way he and Haled approach this, is that you start at the very top and do one segment and then see how this process plays out, see what FTA says about the bidding process, whether they accept the highest offer or not. That'll inform how we do the remaining segments and kind of work our way south.
Okay, thank you. So what can we expect after March 28th? Can you walk us through those next few weeks?
Well, fingers crossed that we have active buyers that are willing to put in some bids. We did look at the market value. We really couldn't bring back much as far as setting an initial bid price. So we kind of fell back to what we thought the FTA would be willing to accept, and I even reached out and talked to them. So we did set a minimum bid price, about 75% of the appraised value. That is currently for the Blue Ash North about $13 million. So we'll find out very quickly if $13 million is a value for that property or not. And we'll be able to return back to this board and give you an update if we receive bids and if those bids are viable and if we can move towards FTA review and selling the property.
We think FDA will approve a 75% minimum.
They were a little cagey in their response, but what they did say is that they would accept a deviation, but they wouldn't say a percentage of deviation or how much. So based on our procurement knowledge and what has been acceptable for purchases, we kind of took that same approach for sale. And typically for goods and services, the FTA is willing at 10 to 20%, depending on if it's goods or services, from your estimate. So we started at 75%, hoping that we could find the market and find out, where this property would be valued from the marketplace as opposed to an appraised value.
Yeah, I think what's really important for FTA is, the price is certainly important, and the expectation is it may not come to what the appraised value is. But as long as it is relatively close, what's really critical for FTA is the process. Did we really follow the right process? Did we do our due diligence? Did we really do our best trying to market it and put it out and so on? I think that's the bigger critical part for FTA. The price is secondary as long as it is kind of reasonable as well. So we'll find out.
Yes.
But to Jason's point, a deviation is expected. It's an appraisal. But we'll see once we receive those bids.
So the degree of control that we have in terms of the parcels that we sell off, can you elaborate on that? And what are the values of the appraised values of the different parcels that we're selling off?
Sure. As you know, the AECOM did the recommendations report. We also had them look at parcels and groupings of parcels that made sense, that were kind of in the same area, that were connected. So they actually grouped them. I think there's 13 different groupings, and we are moving strategically through those groupings and keeping them consistent. So those groupings were appraised in that way. So we are listing them for sale as that same group, so it's consistent with the appraisals.
And then the timeline for the different groupings. Do we have that? The timeline of sale?
It's
Yeah,
in
if you
the
go back a couple
presentation.
slides.
Sorry.
Natalie. Maybe it's just one slide.
It's on slide.
So Blue Ash
7.
South will be in April, and then the Oasis line.
This is the timeline right here.
Yep, the sections will be in May, and then the crown piece being the last section, which
So
estimated
the
in
value
July.
associated with those three, not 13, but those three, is that what we're looking at?
Those three consist of multiple
Right.
segments.
So the northern sections, the crown sections, and those 13 sections, are they divided when they're put out, or they're going to be lumped in?
They are listed as they were grouped and appraised. So there'll be approximately 13 different solicitations that generally fall on those three lines.
And if we receive bidders that are not the same among those lines, we're prepared to navigate that?
Yes. Think of it in terms of when we purchase goods or services, we're spending taxpayer dollar. We're very open and transparent, and we go through a fair competition. Selling the property is very much the same way. We put a property out. It was funded with taxpayer dollars, and we are giving taxpayers, the general public, an opportunity to bid. And as long as they are permitted to do business with us and the FTA accepts their bids, we'll sell it to them. And we could end up with multiple buyers.
So I always look at things, whether it's, 95% of riders are awesome. I focus on the 5%. 95% of buyers might be great actors, but I focus on the 5%. And I'm worried about the bidders that are going to come forward with this opportunity to block or get more out of that land and hold on to it for years to prevent others that may not be the highest bidder. So it's a real concern. I don't know how to navigate this, you guys, but we'll need your help, that's for sure.
We have been very active in reaching out to the public municipalities and jurisdictions along the rail corridor and giving those folks an opportunity, and the knowledge that we are and that we're selling their property, making sure we get it in their hands and give them an opportunity to review it, because holding it in public trust as a public entity, we understand how important that could be, but at the same time, unless we can, we just have to follow the FTA's guidelines on listing it for sale publicly. But we are making sure that they are informed that it's available.
Yes, and again, any of those municipalities can buy this property without us putting it out for bid if they're willing to pay what the appraised value is.
So they can buy it now up to the 55
Yes,
million.
we don't have to put it out. We just have to satisfy the FTA.
But can they do that before we put it out for bid?
Dan, I think you just said up to 55 million, which they can buy specific pieces of it too. They don't have to buy
The whole
the full. Yeah.
Yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
There was maybe it wasn't similar, and maybe my memory's not serving me correctly, but Cincinnati had they had a process, or they went through a rail. Careful here. They had something that went on. So my only question is has there been any conversation on or any talking amongst you all in terms of maybe some things that came up that were concerning or that would be helpful in this process is all. Just sharing notes of.
This is very different than what
It is
the
very-
city went through. We are required by the FTA to follow the FTA rules and regulations. We don't have a lot of choice of how we do this. We're required to. And with this rail right-of-way, most of it, they paid for at least 90% of the total cost of this rail right-of-way. And again, this is something that's going on across the country. We're probably a little ahead of most places of where we are in the process. So we've been speaking with other transit agencies, and they can't wait to see what happens as we move forward, because they're being we're all in the same situation as we bought rail right-of-way with an intended use. That intended use doesn't exist anymore. So we're required by the FTA to dispose of said property. And this is rail lines across the U.S.
Just in closing with, I think you all are doing an excellent job. I don't want you to think that I'm questioning your intelligence or your procedures, FTA being king on it. You're doing a great job just offering those comments, but you're doing a very good job. I think it's a real thoughtful way of doing it, and I like how you're starting at the top and trying to see how that process unfolds before you move forward. So I am a fan of how you're operating with it.
Well, thank you. We hope to have some lessons learned from Blue Ash North that we can take away and build into the rest of the corridors and sell.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
You said some of it is in use and some of it is not. Correct. Do you have kind of a breakdown of that? How is that grouped?
The Blue Ash South, there is not an active rail line. Most of that property does not even have rail on it, but it was purchased in support of the light rail project. The remaining corridors, Blue Ash North, as well as the entire Oasis line, has active freight rail. The picture you see on the far right actually is quite a bit of some of the property in that it is abandoned. And then there's other sections that are very public and that are within public right-of-way, within a municipality or city. The Blue Ash North is actually maintained by the IRE, and they do a pretty good job. But there are other segments that we and our internal maintenance team has contractors under contract to respond to nuisance calls, dumping, those types of things.
Are there any municipalities that have shown interest in
Yes.
purchasing? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I think this was a really important discussion to help us all understand this process a little bit better. So we'll look for a report on what happens with the Blue Ash North in the coming months.
Sarah,
Thank
can I
you.
ask one more question? Sorry. Does this body have to do anything to execute the sale? So, like, do these sales come to us, or do you guys manage all of that, just from an operations standpoint?
I think we have to
believe
bring
that
it
the board would
back
have
to
to
the
like
approve
execute the sale?
disposition of the right of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
We have to bring it back to the board.
Yeah, good question. Thank you.
We'll verify that. Of course, we'll bring it back.
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
board
that's-
one way or the other, but we'll verify what their regulations are and we'll send an email out.
Got
Okay.
it. Thanks.
Great.
That is a good question.
Great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to another program. As was mentioned in Good News, there was a signing ceremony for the MTIF program, and also in March, there was, yes, March 3rd, a virtual meeting to kick off the next round, and Jason will walk us through that.
Next slide, please. So first and foremost, thank you to the executive and board leadership that showed up for the signing event. Your attendance and your attention, I think, is important for this program. It shows that we are invested collectively in the success of MTIF. So I want to just stop and pause and thank you all for that very much. Next
Very
slide.
fun. So if anybody ever has a chance to come to one of these in the future or any of the informational sessions, it's really great to hear from the municipalities themselves. So just put a plug in for next time we have that opportunity to consider coming.
Yeah, the next slide, Natalie. The 26th was our signing event, and less than a week later, we turned the page to round 5. We act very quickly and swiftly. We went right into a virtual meeting that was a kickoff of round 5. We had 32 attendees, and really this was an opportunity for us to give them just some general program information and resources where they could find those things and points of contact. And we also provided the program changes that this board approved just a couple months ago. The ability to proceed change from 12 months to 18 months, the economic growth and connectivity addition, and then the funding categories large and small. We really only had one question from the 32 attendees. It was just centered around the total amount of funds that any one municipality could be awarded, which hasn't changed. It's still capped at 50% of the funds can be awarded to one municipality.
And I'm happy to say that really, and all these changes were received well. To Jason's point, only a question or so. Especially now we've introduced some, I think major change to the guidelines, which is the large and small funding categories. So despite that, I think it was well received by the participants, and we're excited. At least I'm excited to see what kind of proposals we're going to get at the in a couple months.
Next slide, please. We also provided the round 5 program schedule. The request for project proposals went out on March the 3rd. Their proposals are due by May the 30th. Project review and scoring will happen generally from the end of May through the end of July. We will be back seeking authorization in mid-June to late July, and then the board will confirm support staff's recommendation in August. We're still TBD on when the integrating committee will have an opportunity to review our board recommendations, working with Mr. Slim on that. And then the funds will be awarding projects in Q4 of 25, and then in first quarter of 26, the funds will be available to awardees. Next slide, please. And that's
you.
it for MTIF.
Any questions?
Just a comment. I know I keep saying this, quite a bit, but I don't get tired of it. I just want to thank Jason again, for the great work and the value he's added since joining, the Speedy department. and taking charge of this project. I really appreciate everything that you've done to this program, but also the support from the board and certainly Sarah being the chair of this committee. Without this, the board's support and understanding and being flexible to let us do what we need to do, especially in terms of changes to the guidelines, adjustments, and so on, this program wouldn't be that successful. So thank you all.
Thank you. Good team effort. Okay, moving on to new business. I just had two things. Like I said before, I will not be here next week, so Mr. Metz is going to give this committee's report at the board meeting. And also wanted to thank Mr. Metz for the email regarding the red bike update. I don't know if you want to say anything about it here, but it looks like things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, just thanks for the staff team. I know they're getting their ducks in a row so that when everything's ready to execute, we'll be able to hit the ground running on the partnership. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. That is all I have. Anybody else have anything? Okay, well, enjoy opening day next week. Is that next week? Yes, next week. Yes, enjoy opening day and enjoy spring. It looks like we finally made it. So, thank you. With that, we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Something special is happening on opening day, isn't it?